so yesterday we did wet on wet for your sky, the water, the mountains, and then started to indicate the ground. Today, the first thing we're going to do is go back and we're going to add this darker blue layer of trees. So you're going to want your smaller brush, and we're going to swirl it around on the blue, but I also want you to pick up a little bit of black. So the trays, the lids of these watercolor palettes are designed so that you can use them to mix colors. So if you already have a spot that has black on it like I do, you can just get some blur or get some blue and mix it in there. We don't want it to look black. We do want it to look blue. We just want it to be darker than the blue straight out of there. Okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you two different ways to approach this. So you can pick whichever one is easiest for you. I'll kind of do like one version on the left and one version on the right. So we're going to kind of start by doing like just kind of like a triangle-y shape, but we want the edges to be a little bit blurry, so it's not like painting an M. Make sure you come all the way down to your grass. And you can dab, I put in a little bit more blue because it was looking too gray for my taste. So you kind of start by keeping them fairly skinny. You don't want to do like really wide because we're going to come back and add texture. And I'm kind of dabbing around as I do that. So I'm not like painting branches. Since it's far away, you can't see a ton of detail. So you can kind of do it like that. Or if it's easier for you to pull it down, you can actually turn it upside down. And you can come back on the other side and like pull it towards you. So if it's hard for you to like lift away, turn it upside down. But we're going to start by kind of getting like the main shape, and then as you get towards the top, like tap it, kind of dab it a little bit, still kind of staying on the tip of the brush because we don't want it to get really sloppy. But go ahead and start filling that in. So I'm going to let you guys start working on that. I'm going to keep working so you can watch if you need to see like the technique I'm using. Remember, you don't want it to be black. You want it to look like blue, just darker blue than what's behind. And if you have a really little brush, you know, you can do like a lot of skinny ones. It just kind of depends on how many trees you want it to look like there are. And I'm going to do the same thing even right in the middle. But in the middle, I'm going to leave like a little bit of space between, because it's lit up more and you can kind of see more texture in the trees in the center of the photo. Okay? But make sure it goes all the way down. You could also start with just blue and then come back while it's wet and add black to it. That's up to you. Whichever way you prefer. There's usually more than one right way to do things. But make sure it goes all the way down. So we're creating texture. We're not making geometric shapes here. We're going for organic. And make sure your trees have variety. You don't want them all to be like the same height. You want to mix it up a bit. Let some, you know, let it go kind of up and down. Some be taller, some be a little bit wider. Maybe some are a little bit more blue and some have a little bit more black in it. And I had a fuzzy part from my mountain where it wasn't as dry as I thought. Well, I'm just covering that up with a tree. So little taps, little taps. Don't go too fast. And if you think the color dries a little bit lighter than you want, just go back over it. Especially if it's still wet, it'll look natural. It'll just kind of like blur out a little bit. So even though I'm dabbing, I'm not destroying my brush. I'm not like smashing it down as hard as I can. Kind of like holding it at an angle so I can get a small, you know, little dabby shape, but I'm not destroying it. It's still keeping my bristles smooth. So on this tree over here, I had kind of a weird shape, so I'm going back and I'm like dabbing more. You also, if you have a tiny brush, you can go back and add some like teeny tiny little dots that like just either are right next to it with a gap or like just barely touch, so then it looks like towards the top, like those little branches. Or it's okay if it's not exactly like mine, as long as you can see that it stands out from the mountains behind it. That's the biggest thing. So I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about what you can do next. What we can do next is start to add some dark blue or black, like little rocks, and some darker spots in the water. So especially like along this bottom here where I made the little thing jut out, you can kind of like tap, only this time if it's a little bit more like darker, it'll look more like little rocks or something. So you can do that like along the edge, and then as it gets over to the side, I'm gonna just like kind of paint that like solid and tap that up. And then I'm going to do some in the water too. So I'm going to pick some spots and be like, oh, this looks like a good spot for a little rock here. The bottom though of your rock needs to be flat because it would have water coming up around it. So you don't want to paint a circle. It'll just look like a polka dot in your water. Don't do that. But you can paint, you know, some like rocks in the water, and then we'll come back and add like ripples and stuff around it. You can also, I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit. You can get like some dark blue and make some streaks. If you're doing rocks, make sure they're not all like the same size or the same distance apart, or it will look too even. So I'm going to come back with blue and a thin brush, and I'm going to do like some lines. It might have made sense to do this before the rocks, but that's okay. Sometimes I make it up as I go. And let it have like some darker streaks so it looks like the water's moving. So keeping them like really pretty skinny and horizontal. And then I'm gonna have some come like here where it's a little bit wavy and then pulls to the side so it looks like there's like a little ripple there or something. I'm gonna do it off on the other side as well. I'm gonna paint some streaks. I'm trying to not get too much, like I want to have some of those darker streaks on in the middle, but I don't want to cover up. I still want to have a lot of that sunset reflecting, which now I'm looking at this, I wish I would have made the sun color in my sky a little bit brighter. If I had noticed that before I did the trees, I probably would have gone back and added some, but that's okay. Once you have your trees, you don't want to work on the sky behind it, or you'll probably regret it, because you'll probably mess up your trees and then it'd be tricky to fix. And if you decide like your ground needs to be darker, you can do that too, because layers are your friend in watercolor. So kind of underneath each rock, I just did a little like you know, blue line, so it's sort of like a shadow cast from the rock, and just kept it horizontal. Okay, for the next part, we're gonna add a little clump of grass here. I'm gonna show you how you can do that. I want you to notice how the shadows are like blackish blue, and then there's green towards the top, but it still probably has some extra blue added into it. It's not the bright green straight out of your palette. So first I'm gonna get some black, and I'm just gonna kind of like dab it down in this corner. That'll sort of be like the shadows. So I don't want it to be too even. I'm not gonna like paint an oval. That would look weird. So kind of dabbing like that. I'm gonna put a little bit of blue on top. And come up like a little bit more. And then I'm gonna I have this brush that's a little bit skinnier. I'm gonna swirl my brush on some green paint, and I'm kind of rolling it as I pull away so I can get somewhat of a point on there. If you have a skinnier brush, this is even easier, but I'm using one that's a little bit thicker, so that way you guys can see you can still do it. So I'm gonna overlap this a little bit, and with real gentle pressure, I'm gonna like pull up. So I'm just starting in like the blue or the black. That way it blends, and I've got like some green mixed in. And kind of make them, this grass actually like kind of curves down in the picture, so you can kind of go like up and then turn, up and then turn. You just don't want it to be like perfectly fanned out, and you don't want it all to be the same height. You want to have some variety in there. You can do some little blobs of like more green towards the bottom. And you could even have some like in other places like towards the bottom. Maybe there's some like blue-green grasses here that kind of like pop up off of the bottom. Then you can come back along like your bank, and with light marks you can do like some little clumps of grass there too. Then if you get that done and you want to, you can add some trees that are closer, that are gonna show up like pretty much black in front of the blue trees. So what I'm gonna do on these ones, I'm gonna pretend they're a different type of tree. So still just trying to stay on the tip of my brush so it's not thick, because I know my trees are dry behind it. I can add a skinny line going up. Maybe there's some that come out like a little bit of a different angle. Maybe I'll do a little one over here. And then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna dab with black, so that way it's separated from the blue behind it. And I'm kind of like leaving a little bit more space, so I don't want it to be solid at the bottom. And then I can like, you know, maybe there's like grasses growing in front of that too. So you can do another layer of trees in front if you have time. So on these ones I did do a skinny trunk to start with. You don't want to totally cover up your blue trees. You want those to show. If you do ones in front, they're probably a little bit shorter. You can kind of dab like here and there and let it have some more gaps. And then I think I'm going to add more darkness in my water, because those trees would be reflecting. There might be more grass and stuff. So that's how I'm going to spend the rest of my time after I add some more trees, is making some more like darkness in the water here and there. I think that looks like a good spot for a little cluster of trees. So notice we're not doing broccoli trees, where you do like a big rectangle for the trunk and then like a big, you know, blob around it for the leaves. We're dabbing to create like the texture and the impression of leaves. We're not just painting one solid shape. I'm noticing on this tree I'm looking at, the branches kind of like cluster pointing up. So I'm kind of doing some of that too.